Morning, everybody. Welcome to Out of Bed. My name is Topher, and I have a co-host. What's my co-host's name?
Hey, I'm Matt Palmer.
Hey, Matt. How are you doing today?
Good. How about you? It's been a few weeks. I'm ready to do this, man.
I know. Me too. I'm very excited. So for those of you who are listening or watching for the first time, this is the podcast where Matt and I sit down with friends or family or strangers that I DM on Twitter about what gets them out of bed and what they're interested in, what they're passionate about. And today, I'm really excited about this, Matt. So, Matt, there's a YouTube channel.
Yep.
Cracked, and it was also a website. It still is a website, I believe, and I think it was a magazine as well.
You think it was a magazine?
Yes, it was a magazine. It was Cracked was a magazine, right? I'm
Yeah.
Googling it. Yeah,
like
it was
in the annals of great comedy magazines, it's Cracked and it's Mad.
I grew up in 1991, Matt. I didn't read magazines. I watched YouTube, and I loved Crack's YouTube channel so much. And then a while ago, like a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, it like disappeared. And then very recently, videos started popping back up. And they're really great, and I'm really excited to see content from that channel again in that kind of style. And that there's somebody behind that, and that's our guest. You want to meet him, Matt?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I took a pause to drink.
That was a very dramatic pause. I was like, oh okay.
We're going to meet him, and his name is Jordan Breeding. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Hey, what's up? How are you guys? Yeah, I didn't know. I was like, am I supposed to jump in?
I should have prepared better.
I am also excited.
There we go. Yeah, that was me. That was all me.
Just bust through like the Kool-Aid guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man. Anyway, so, Matt, the past couple weeks that we have done this, I think I'm starting to go crazy on Zoom. And I'm starting to lose my ability to host properly. And the past couple times you have been asking the question, and you've been asking it very well. So can I get you to ask Jordan the very important question?
Sure, let's do it. So, Jordan, you know the routine on this show. What gets you out of bed?
Man, there are a lot of things that get me out of bed. I think it can kind of fluctuate day to day. But one of the biggest things, I guess from a work perspective, has been I just really enjoy making things that people enjoy. But more specifically, I think what I really like doing is thinking too hard about entertainment unnecessarily, but not exclusively without reason. I was just talking to my wife earlier. I used to have this friend whose dad this was like elementary school and middle school. He would always get a bunch of my friends, there'd be like 10 of us. He would get us together every time like some sort of historical movie came out. So like Master and Commander or Gladiator or Last of the Mohicans or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd make us all dress up from the period. He would essentially give us like a whole talk about it so that we would understand like what maritime life was like in the 1840s, or I don't even know. I forgot all of it, obviously. But whenever the heck Master and Commander was set, maybe it was the 1700s. I feel like it was pre-America. So anyway.
Doing book reports for movies, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I remember even as a kid being like, I feel like this makes it better. It's cool to see things explode and like people's arms fall off. But I think even having that context makes it more interesting and more immersive. And even on another level, I was listening to a podcast with Jason Pargin, who was one of the former founders, essentially, of the Cracked website. And he's had this Quentin Tarantino story where basically when Tarantino was a kid, he went to his mom and asked to rent some kind of like blaxploitation film because he thought it looked cool and like people were going to get shot. And his mom said no, because you'll only see the violence, you won't get the context. Like you won't get the political subtext of it.
Right.
And I've always thought I just was thinking how cool that is, to think about entertainment as not just things blowing up, but either learning the stories behind it or digging into the subtext, intentional or not. And even honestly, making fun of a movie's plot or whatever, just like finding plot holes, is fun for me as an exercise as a former English major. As just like, it's fun to think about somebody sitting down and writing this stuff and either missing it or thinking it didn't matter or whatever, and just kind of like the fun. As somebody who's interested in story, it's fun to think about like, well, if I was writing this, maybe I would have covered up this plot hole, but then also thinking, well, but then I'd have a 6-hour movie that was airtight, but
right,
and miserable to watch. So yeah, I get out of bed excited to do stuff like that. And even when it came to like music, I do music now for my job, and I have been playing music since I was 10. Just the ability of art to make people think and to make people emotionally react is just so freaking fascinating to me. I just love getting to be part of it any way that I can. And also just very generally and very basically, I've never had a real job, and I don't want one.
So you've never had a 9-to-5?
The closest that I've had, like a true 9-to-5,
right,
is I worked at an architecture firm right out of college. But I was technically only an intern, and it was 3 days a week. And it was actually kind of part of, I took a year-long postgraduate, sort of like a leadership development course. And it was through a church. I actually took some seminary classes, like post grad level. Not enough to like, I have like 9 credits or something. But part of that was you would live with a host family, and you would go work somewhere in town. And people that knew what they wanted to do would be like, I want to work in oncology. Like I want to work at the UVA hospital here.
Mm-hmm.
And they would get placed. And I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of creative. And they're like, great, architecture firm, which as an English major, not very useful to them.
Right.
So that's the closest I've had. And then from there, I mean, it would either be like part-time. I would drive shuttle or salsa, or I worked at GameStop, or all this stuff. Like the only real jobs I've had have been like playing music at a church.
So when you looked at YouTube and that landscape, how did you sit there and say like, there's a place for me, and how did you carve out your niche?
So interestingly, at the architecture firm, I had so much freaking free time because it's not like I was drawing or anything. I mean, like there's nothing I could do. They had me like make websites, but I don't know how to make websites either. So I would just Squarespace stuff. And then they were like, it's probably not working.
You were in your 20s, and like older people looked at you and said like, you know how to do websites.
Right. They had me do some InDesign stuff for like brochures, but even then I was like, I don't know.
Right.
So I had a lot of free time. So that's when I actually discovered Cracked, was during that year. And I was so blown away, because it's like, oh my gosh, it's all these things I didn't know I cared about, like making fun of movies, or just different aspects of history that I hadn't thought about or knew about. And, I was super interested in them, and I got the job leading worship and doing music at a church. But then the campus that I was leading at closed. So I became just like the production guy, just did videos and stuff. And I didn't like that as much. So I quit to play in a band, and then that fell through freaking immediately. And so I just remembered that Cracked took unsolicited article ideas And so I started sending them stuff, and then I've been writing for them, even through everybody getting fired and stuff, up until now. I mean, I had an article out like last week, and when they fired everybody, like you had mentioned, when they fired everybody with their YouTube, it was December of 2017. I've just been missing their channel for the last 2.5 years, and so I just told a friend, I was like, I've written a lot of articles. I wonder if I could do that. They wouldn't take it, obviously, but so we shot a pilot and then we sent it to them. So that's the thing is, I guess, like, I didn't know that I could carve out my own niche per se, but I felt like my niche could fit their niche.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they agreed. So kind of lucky how that worked out.
Was that pilot that you did, is that the first episode of Your Brain Uncracked, or?
It is. So technically it was shot 3 times though. We shot it once, and I wasn't even looking at we didn't know what we were doing. It was just me and a buddy. And so the teleprompter was set up in such a way that like the whole time I'm looking here in relation to the screen. So it's useless. So we ended up reshooting it, and then we sent that in, and that's what they accepted. But it still wasn't that great. So we actually shot it after we shot episode 6 again. And then that's what you guys have now. So
okay.
That's why 1 actually probably looks better than 2, because it was filmed. We were still figuring things out, but it was filmed significantly later in the process.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
And so you were submitting things to Cracked. I believe you were writing for other websites at the time as well, right?
Well, so Cracked was the first because it was that whole thing where, like, when I left the job, it was to play music.
Okay.
And very quickly realized that was a bad idea. So I started pitching to Cracked, and then I used some of that Cracked stuff as a leverage to start writing for other websites. Like we moved to Atlanta for 3 months to write for Paste magazine, which was a lot of fun. So I interned there, and I was really hoping for a job because I felt like I was doing pretty well. I wrote like 400 articles in 3 months. But even as I was sitting there, this was 2017, so everybody that worked there was getting fired. And I was like, either there'll be a spot open or the company is not doing as well as I thought it was. Turned out to be the latter. Because, that was the end of the summer and everybody was fired. All the video people were fired at Cracked by December of 2017. So anyway. And then it's just been kind of picking stuff up, submitting here and there. Sometimes I know people or whatever. But I haven't written for that many sites. I just kind of dug pretty deeply into a few. So.
Is there any writing gig that you would like to get that you haven't gotten yet? Like any particular site or place you'd like to write for?
The one I have applied to more than any other is The Onion. I write for a satire site now that's really cool that I really like called The Hard Times.
Yeah.
I love Hard Times. I
love them too, and I've written 30, 40 articles for them, and it's a freaking blast. But, like, the natural leap from there would be can you write for The Onion? So that would be cool. I would have said McSweeney's, but I got an article for them once, basically. So I felt like I've achieved it.
Yeah, you're good.
They don't pay, so it's not like, I mean, it's prestigious, I guess, but it's not like, I got to make a living off of it. So, but yeah, The Onion would be great. It'd just be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So when you were looking at the landscape, like on YouTube and the internet, how did you say, like, this thing I'm going to carve out? Like when you look at like things like CinemaSins or similar like movie analysis kind of with a sense of humor, how did you like blue sky what you were going to do versus what was out there and say like, this is going to be different?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think what I can do versus a few other sites is, I think on one end of the spectrum, you've got your nerd writers or your like video essays that aren't very funny necessarily, but they are very, very insightful.
Right.
And can go into extreme depth. I mean, Nerdwriter is just one, but they, there are people that do video essays that are an hour long, 2 hours long. They'll do even Plinkett, which I know is like funnier, but those are like 2-hour videos. And then CinemaSins is probably further towards. There's not really a lot of insight in most of those, and Honest Trailers splits that difference a little bit, but those are a little bit more like that's dumb. Like CinemaSins, I remember. If you've watched the YouTube series, I have made fun of King Kong Skull Island a lot because I thought it was super dumb. But I watched the CinemaSins of it, and the director of that got in a fight with them because, for example, at one point they were like, "It's raining." Bing. And you're like, well, that's not fair. How's that sinful? And the director was like, what the hell are you talking about? How is it? Why is it not allowed to rain? And so, that's an example of like, there's so many problems with that movie that do not pertain to it raining. So what I want to do is like split that difference between doing things that are insightful, but without ever losing sight of the fun, and also recognizing that I'm not trying to like eviscerate this one movie or this one idea. It's more built thematically, and it changes, but it's more built thematically about like just goofy things that I've noticed and that can often pop up in multiple movies. This week is going to be different, actually. It's only 2 movies. It's saying how the narrator of Fight Club is the same character as Ralphie in A Christmas Story. And so that's like, that is more in depth, but it's also pointless, right? I mean, that's obviously not true. That's more just me flexing like my English major research, whatever. And so that is, again, more fun than it is super insightful, but I don't want it to be dumb, I guess. Like, yeah. It's like, what would happen if Nerdwriter was a little bit funnier and only spent 3 minutes on a movie or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, especially on YouTube, that's like extremely intelligent and insightful while also being silly and pointless. And I think that is a very valuable like I just found a channel called Polygon recently.
Oh yeah.
And oh my gosh, just like they just did like this incredible video on like how much money Mario would need to make to retire.
Yeah, that's Unraveled with Brian David Gilbert. Yeah.
Yeah, I like was blown away by how like intelligent and like how much math was involved in that video, while also being like, this is so pointless and stupid, and I love it so much.
What's funny is you say that. I love Brian David Gilbert and his stuff. I think he actually tends to err more on stupid. And I don't say that in any sort of demeaning way. I mean, I guess instead of stupid, maybe funny and interesting than particular. That one is sort of more of an exception because he does use a lot more math. His most recent one is talking about like the ideal gamer space.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
But like, he like puts a green screen behind him of his room or whatever. Like, then he like wears a green screen suit and then like puts himself in digitally. This is not, obviously his stuff is freaking hilarious, and I don't think I can approach that. But you can get through a 20-minute video and you're like, I didn't learn anything about anything.
That's true.
So I'm hoping that most of the time mine get you a little bit closer to something. But his stuff is awesome. I really enjoy that. I agree. I recently stumbled upon Polygon 2 via somebody who showed me Brian David Gilbert stuff, and then he got hired by Polygon. Whatever stuff. That's funny. It's funny that you mentioned them.
Yeah, I've been watching them a lot lately, and my wife has been very confused.
Yeah. Well,
what's going on?
Yeah.
Well, you talked about like the memories you had of like going to movies when you were a kid.
Yeah.
How much of this, like, of what you do is working out things you've been thinking about since you were like 6 and 7 and 8 years old?
A lot of it. I mean, so literally the first article I pitched to Cracked was about Star Wars things in the EU, which I guess now is legends, like in the books and the comic books and stuff that are no longer canon, but that you would never see in the movies. And it was because I was like 10. Wait, maybe I was. How old are you when you're in 7th grade? Is that like 11 or 12?
11 or 12.
Yeah. So I was homeschooled for just 7th and 8th grade, and to be stereotypical, I read like 700 Star Wars books. But a scene stuck out to me, which was an X-wing fighter who maybe becomes a Jedi at some point has sex with a Bothan, but he is allergic to her fur, and she is allergic to his sweat, and so they mutually break out in hives or something. And I was like, what a freaking weird thing to write about. And it stuck with me for, however many years, 15 years or something. And then I finally was like, I found somewhere that not only can I tell somebody, I can get paid. And I was saying earlier, I was an early adopter of MoviePass. So I had it back in 2015 when it still cost like $35. So I have seen a lot of recent movies as well. And I tend to err more on the side of recent movies because people are more likely to have seen them. And I also, I kind of weirdly have a gap. I took film studies as a minor, and so I know a lot of classic movies, and I know a lot of like late 90s on, but I sort of missed that classic 80s where like a bunch of people just a few years older than me remember. Like I just watched Aliens for the first time.
Holy cow.
Like last week. So some of it's childhood stuff. A lot of it is just I have a good memory. And so whenever I need to write an article, usually what I do is if I have an idea or something I find funny in one movie, I'll just Google like movies 1995, and it usually pops up like the 25-ish movies that were big that year. I'll just go by year and just try and remember the plots really fast.
Yeah.
So it's a combination, I guess.
Do you have like a property or a franchise that you've enjoyed writing about the most, or maybe even one that you haven't written about enough that you'd like to write more about?
It's a good question. I mean, I love writing about, I haven't written about it a ton, but I love writing about Star Wars whenever I get the chance, which is not that unique, obviously, but I think it's just such a fascinating attempt to be so sprawling. Like it covers so many years in some sense, and it doesn't do a great job of it. Not really. And that's why, when I got to Rise of Skywalker, I was like, nothing makes any freaking sense. But I have such an affinity for Star Wars, primarily because of all those Star Wars books I read as a kid. I just love the universe so much. Whenever I can talk about it, I have fun with it because I used to have all this knowledge that felt unique, but now it's all pointless. Like I knew Chewbacca's son was Lobaka, and Chewbacca blows up on a moon at some point, saving Han Solo's son, Anakin. Anyway.
So now I got the question. Chewbacca had two different sons then, right? Did he have Lobaka and he had Itchy from the holiday special?
Right. I don't know. I don't know how that I don't know how that worked out. I don't remember Itchy being in the books, but Lobaka was a Jedi and he had a silver lightsaber. And
who doesn't want to see that on film?
What?
Who doesn't want to see that on film? A big 7-foot Wookiee wielding a lightsaber.
Yeah.
I just want to see two people break out in hives while making love to each other. That's like all I've ever wanted from a fantasy sci-fi movie.
I think that's what all the Reylos wanted from Rise of Skywalker.
Well, they kind of got it.
One of them died.
Yeah, but there's just so many weird things because it was so similar in some ways to the movies, though less so. It was so lawless. It was like, I think they tried to have things that made sense, but it was also like hundreds of people just writing whatever weird stuff they could think of that would be fun in the Star Wars universe. So, I really enjoyed those. And I also really like Marvel. I just like big popular franchises just because to really get into kind of plot hole stuff, you usually have to go for a high concept idea. Like it has to be a sci-fi movie, or it has to be like a really specific type of horror movie. Because you're not going to be like, oh, look at all these plot holes in Marriage Story. Like nobody would cheat on their wife or whatever. It just, you're not going to get it from a lot of your Oscar contenders. That's why I was so excited. I was saying, I think I found a plot hole in 1917, which is fun because that's not a movie that historical fiction doesn't lend itself to many.
Too many plot holes. Yeah.
A one camera movie. Oh, there's the plot hole.
You have to have more than one camera.
That's not realistic.
Did it rain at all in 1917?
No, that's why it's a perfect film.
Yeah, because there's no rain.
Yeah.
No sins there.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah. So how much do you miss the movies right now?
That is the number. I've been saying this. That is the number one thing that I miss. I am still very much an aficionado of the theater, and even to the point where I actually prefer Alamo Drafthouse. It's less immersive, but they care so much, and they'll throw you out if you talk. I just like that they're as nerdy about it as I am. Mm-hmm. I've been to several of their screenings where they'll bring in celebrity. They'll live stream it to us. We never get celebrities, but they'll do interviews. And the guy who owns Alamo is so just goofy about movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just very, very clearly a cinephile who got lucky enough to start his own theater and it survived.
So they serve you at your seat. You said right? Did they do it throughout the entire movie?
Yeah, if you want.
Oh wow! Because
they'll bring you your ticket or your receipt 30 minutes before the end, which can be kind of a spoiler sometimes. But
yeah,
yeah. I guess I've never like. I think they might cut you off on certain things. I'm not sure how that works.
We have Cinebistro by us, and they let you in 30 minutes before the movie starts and come around and take everybody's order and give you your receipt before the movie starts. And then, like, if you want anything after the movie starts, there's a concession stand that you can go to otherwise.
Oh, interesting. Well, they definitely, I want to say, like, there have been times where I went in at like 10:30 in the morning and I was like, I want lunch, but like not right now. And they're like, okay, we'll push it 45 minutes, but then you have to eat it or like we're making it. So maybe it is limited by like, maybe they cut you off at 45 minutes from the end or something. I've just never pushed it.
Do they serve alcohol there as well? It's Draft House, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. They have a bar you could just hang out in if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. My wife and I have actually gone just to get their pizza. So we didn't even go to a movie. So
wow. Yeah, we did that. Oh, go ahead, man.
Oh, we did that for Cinebistro as well. Like we went just for the food because it's just like good upscale bar food.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Draft House is the same.
I went down to Austin a couple years ago for South by Southwest, and I saw one of the Alamos, and I didn't get a chance to go in because I was like working, but it was one of those experiences of like, oh my gosh, this is one of the originals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
And because that was
obviously Alamo.
Yeah, Yeah, and it really, I remember when that like broke out like 2 decades ago, and to think it's like a national chain, like is really at this point setting the bar for like the theater experience.
Yeah. So, and that's the cool thing too is one of the last movies I saw before all this was Guy Ritchie's new movie, The Gentleman, and they had a Q&A and all that stuff, and he made the point that Guy Ritchie's first movie, and I don't know if you've seen this, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Yeah.
They were one of the only chains, or one of the first movie theaters at all to run it, and it ended up becoming such a huge hit, it actually put Alamo on the map because they were running it before, I mean, I don't know if exactly who, but like before Regal or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they made a bunch of money, and they got that reputation for like finding the cool indie movies that Regal doesn't think is worth their time, or they can't spend the distribution money to get it in there or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I remember like for that angle too.
I remember Austin movie snobs talking online in like the early 2000s about Memento.
Yeah.
And I went out to the theater like not knowing virtually anything about it. And I remember when the movie ended, I was like, can we roll this back? Can we play this again? And like I literally went back the next night and watched it again.
Yeah.
It was like one of those experiences that just sort of like poof.
Right.
I love it when a movie does that.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, yeah, ever since I got Movie Pass, my wife, she likes movies okay, but she's not huge into it necessarily, so she doesn't feel like she has to go all the time.
Yeah.
So I've gotten more into just going to see movies by myself, especially when I was doing more writing, full-time, like freelance writing. It's like I didn't have anything to do at 2 p.m., so I would go watch a movie. And there's so many like really fun experiences you can have even just by yourself. Like I remember watching Get Out, and it was just an extremely fun theater experience because everybody was like there for it. They laughed at the right times, they yelled at the right times. It's just, even by myself, it still felt more social than a lot of times hanging out with people at your own house. It doesn't, I don't know, doesn't always have that same impact. So big fan of theaters. Hope they don't die.
Yeah, I feel like not to keep dwelling on this, but like with Star Wars, when I saw The Rise of Skywalker, I kind of felt like the theater going experience has kind of dulled that experience of going to see a Star Wars movie. Because you reserve your tickets, there's no waiting in line, and people just walk in right before the movie starts. And it used to be like a Star Wars movie going experience was a communal experience.
Right.
And I didn't get dressed up for it, but there's plenty of people who did. And that kind of experience like made it all the more special.
Sure. Yeah. I've never first seen a Star Wars movie not in theaters, which is surprising because I was born in 91, but they reran the original trilogy when I was a kid, and my dad took me to all of them. So yeah, I honestly, even for Last Jedi, I had to stand in line. I went to I saw it in DC, of all places. I just happened to be there, and yeah, there was a super long line. Everybody ran in.
Yeah,
so it was fun.
I do feel that like the midnight premiere has definitely been kind of lost though. Like I think I remember a lot of the movies I saw in college, we would do the midnight showings because I went to Mount St. Mary's, so Gettysburg was like it was like just above us, and we were the only ones that would go to the theater because there was nobody else around except Mount St. Mary's students. So we would like take over this theater in Gettysburg for midnight showings. But now like seeing a movie like for the midnight showing means going like 6 o'clock the day before. And
right.
It's kind of disappointing, I feel like. But I will say that I still get, for the most part, that experience of like the crowd being there for it together. at least with the
Infinity
Marvel
War
movies.
and Endgame.
Yes.
Infinity War and Endgame really had that.
Oh my gosh. I still our theater that we were in for Infinity War was amazing. Like they were cheering the second anybody showed up on screen. And like Thor showing up in Wakanda, everybody lost their minds. But the crowd that I had for Endgame was so disappointing.
Really?
It broke my heart because I remember being so excited because of how good the crowd was for Infinity War that I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is gonna be real.
Yeah.
And like Cap getting Thor's hammer,
right?
Nothing.
What?
And I was like, I started to cheer and then realized that nobody else was saying anything. I was like, really? And then for Avengers Assemble, nothing. Like Falcon saying like on your left, nothing.
Right.
It's heartbreaking. So like my wife is super exhausted with me like going on, like I'll just like pull some random video that's like Endgame theater reaction up on YouTube and rewatch those clips from Endgame and just get like a little bit choked up seeing Thor wield Mjolnir and the crowd actually care about it.
Yeah, that's funny.
So you were born in 91?
Yeah.
Oh, I was about to say, because I don't think you would be able to vibe with this experience, but like when I saw Jurassic Park in the theater in 93, I was like 12 or 13 years old. And it was one of those experiences where you could feel the temperature in the entire crowd go up about 10 degrees when the T-Rex shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I remember there was a moment where the goat's leg or something like that gets thrown on the windshield. This woman this teenage girl who I had no idea who she was sitting next to me. She literally jumped out of her chair and grabbed my arm. And I was like, this is weird, but this is cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And I miss that. I miss like being with strangers, like not knowing a soul and everybody being on the same page.
Yeah. So Infinity War was good, although it was a little bit diluted because everybody dies, and all of us are like, oh, and then some kid goes, "Where's Spider-Man?" Get out! Like, are they dead? Like, shut up! I'm grieving.
Oh wow!
And then Endgame was great because so I got into a deal with Ranker, which is another website where I write their Easter egg stuff for basically not all new movies, but a lot of new movies, like high concept movies. Again, like big movies. And I did that for Endgame, and my friend bailed on me last minute because he always bails on me. So I was sitting next to this guy who was also alone, and we just like hit it off, and he was helping me the whole time find Easter eggs. And it was just like, it felt very cool to just, walk into a theater, and the only thing that we know, well, we ended up actually knowing some of the same people, which was weird, but it was just cool to like bond over our shared love of this stupid action figures beating each other up for like 3 hours. Right. It was fun. It was really fun.
I feel like you could like it can still happen in the theaters, but I do feel like that happened when we had to wait in line for long periods of time.
Sure.
Like we'd just be like sitting. I remember when I was a kid and you had to like physically stand in line at a like a Ticketmaster location.
Right.
To get like tickets to wrestling shows. And my dad would take me to like Sears where they had the Ticketmaster, and we'd be standing in line with like these wrestling nerds and just all be talking about whatever was going on. And like I remember one time this guy like drove by in this car. He was like clearly trying to show off, and he was like blaring wrestling entrance themes.
Yeah.
And it was both the coolest thing that I thought I saw at that time, and also the absolute like nerdiest dorkiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Now I always make sure to reserve my seats as far from anyone else as I can. I like, if it's up to me, as much as I claim I want to meet somebody, I don't want to talk to anybody. Like
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually, when I saw Joker, I was doing the Easter egg thing too. And everybody was like, saw it at the midnight or, the 6 p.m. showing. And like, at this point, we're all worried we're all going to get shot because this is kind of in the middle of all the mass shootings and this movie seemed crazy. And I was sitting there, my hoodie up, scrunched over with my little notepad, looking around at everybody. And then I realized, they all think that I'm the white guy with the hoodie and the notepad, like, oh yeah, this is how I should shoot somebody in the face or whatever. And so I realized, I was like, it's going to be fine. Everybody's going to think that I'm the...
Oh, no. Oh, man.
I was just realizing as people walked in, I was like, you think that guy's a shooter? I'm like, but he thinks I'm a shooter because... Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So do you find yourself doing more content now during this whole period, or do you find yourself being more creative?
Well, the whole YouTube channel is insane amounts of work. It's not a full-time job, but it's a lot. Because I'm writing the script, I'm doing a chunk of the editing. Obviously, I'm performing it. I've been doing stuff like I got us a sponsor for one of the episodes just kind of on my own. So I had to coordinate that. We're doing a couple of episodes with like other channels. Hopefully Hard Drive is going to do one with us and the Modern Rogue is going to do one with us, I think. And so I was doing all the graphics, like all the promo stuff. A lot of work. Yeah. So I don't know that I'm more creative, but I'm definitely working way harder.
Did you teach yourself to do all that stuff?
Yeah.
Man, you really went after it.
Well, I took TV production in high school. So I learned iMovie and a little bit of Final Cut. But now I'm using Premiere and trying to be like an adult with my editing or whatever. So, yeah. Well, so here's the thing. We have a guy, the company that owns Cracked, got us a guy who does the first pass. So he picks like the take. We usually shoot 4 takes, 2 up close and 2 far. And then he kind of picks the best ones so that I don't have to agonize over that. And then I'll do all the clips and all the tightening and all the editing and all the kind of like what you see. And then the guy who shoots it for me and who runs the teleprompter and who does everything else that I don't do, basically, he does all the keying, like he does the green screen stuff. And like when I did Classic Joker Move, like he put that in and stuff like that. So he does a lot of the higher end. This is his job. And the cool thing for him is that because of quarantine, he hasn't been able to do as much. There's just not a lot of video stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
And so this has been a cool way, to get him some work as well. But I'm still working full time too, so I'm very sleepy a lot of the time. It's great, but I need a nap probably.
I know you did a really great like Q&A video when like a few weeks in, because I think a lot of people had like a lot of questions, obviously, because people were subscribed to this channel. They loved it for a number of years. Oh, there goes Matt. I'm sure.
I'm just grabbing some more drink.
Oh, okay, cool. So like a lot of people were watching. Can I hold on 1 second? I'm gonna there we go. Just mute Matt. A lot of people probably had questions. I know I was one of the people that initially was like, who's trying to steal my thing that I used to love and like they're just copying them. But like in that video, you do talk about how your goal was to point people back to this channel and point people back to the videos that you like watched and were kind of formed by.
Yeah.
Are there any other goals with like trying to maybe make different types of videos on the channel, or encourage the people at Crack to maybe add more of the video content back in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's hard for me to explain is there was no plan. Like I made it, but I didn't think there was like no way they were going to take it. It was my thought. It was arguably more of an exercise than it was like a career furthering. I just was like, well, it could be cool to have on my portfolio this, like, you know, if I had made a YouTube video, this is how I could do it, and it's pretty good. So for them to be like, no, how about like 10 episodes? And then to be like, a couple episodes in, to be like, what about 20 episodes? And I'm like, okay. There was not a lot of foresight. And similarly, it's not like they were expecting me or anyone to send them anything. They had been talking ahead of time about potentially maybe just doing, they had been talking about hiring a video guy to do basically just, I don't know if you're familiar with the site Looper, but they do a lot of, for lack of a better term, just video articles. Yeah. I've written one article for them and they made it a video, and it's almost verbatim what I wrote, but somebody's saying it and it's over images of the movie.
Yeah.
So they were like, maybe that's what we could do just to monetize it a little bit or something, but they hadn't really gotten that far into it. And obviously quarantine hit, so it's not like you're bringing a bunch of people in to interview them. So I was also just kind of lucky with the timing. But yeah, now that it's happening, we're still kind of talking. So I can't do the show at this rate forever.
Yeah.
Because it's just too much work, especially if it's not my real job. But even if it was, it's just a lot of content to come up with on a weekly basis. And I'm lucky to some extent. I'm pulling from years of ideas, some of which have been published on Crack, some have not. But even still, it's not like I want to go through every idea I've ever had in my life in the first year or whatever. I need to have time to do stuff. So this run will end eventually, and we've been talking about other things to replace it. One of them is like other ideas that I've had that I think I could just get across in 2 minutes, like the 1917 thing, and have that not be hosted, just talking over, kind of like a Looper thing, but original content, not just like some article that's already been published. They have some ideas, but I'm not an employee or anything, so they don't tell me a ton, but seems like they had an idea for a comic book thing. We have a writer in Chile who knows a lot about comic books and has been interested in stuff, apparently. And I think kind of the idea is, if this worked, if my thing was well received enough, then maybe that could open the door to other things. But I think we're still trying to figure out what that could possibly look like. They seem to want me to do whatever I want for now, which is really cool and really fun. And again, not something that I have planned, so I'm not sure what that looks like. But yeah, some of the next episodes of Your Brain and Cracked are a lot more varied. Kind of like this Fight Club one is a little bit more deep dive into one subject. I'm doing one that's only about whether Deckard is replicant in Blade Runner. And it's not that funny. It is actually closer to a Nerd Writer thing.
Right.
And then talking about like just one dumb movie I saw that was really terrible and is funny. So a little bit more variance, because nobody knows what the show is. It wasn't intended to be a thing. So the more that I can experiment with it, the more we can also look at, does Cracked do more of a video essay nerd writery thing, like longer.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better to do, or could we have a series only on bad movies, like How Did This Get Made, but a video podcast esque thing, or but different than them, more insightful than theirs, because theirs is just really funny, famous people ripping on movies, and we could do more research and stuff. So the plan is yes, but I have no idea what the plan is per se. But I'm hoping to stay involved as much as I can.
You mentioned you're married. How supportive is your wife of what you do and this kind of life that you've chosen?
We were actually just talking about this the other day, because I have always been very, I mean, I guess the word is creative, but maybe ambitious, or just like I have a hard time not making things, I guess. And so we were just talking, she was in the band with me that we were in for like 7 years. And there was one weird summer where we played like kids camps. It's like 1st through 5th graders. And which was a little humiliating for like a relatively heavy rock band, but we're like, hey, this is a way to make money. But she was hanging out at the pool and I was hanging out at the pool, and I just remember I'm circling the pool and just like thinking, and I'm like, if we got married, would you be okay with me like joining a touring band and being gone all the time? Like, that these are the things that I'm into or whatever. And she was like, yeah. I mean, she's been incredibly supportive. She doesn't really get it from like she's like, I don't know why anybody would care about this, but also she's just not like the biggest movie buff or anything. But she has been super supportive of me doing stuff. And I guess, compared to the opposite, which would be, I don't give a crap about anything, and I just work my job to die or whatever. I've always been, as my whole goal in life is to not get a real job. And I have succeeded so far, and we're still alive. And we had our first daughter 15 months ago.
It's awesome.
And she rocks. And a cool thing about my job, so because I work at a church, I work on Sundays, which means I don't work on Fridays. And so I keep her while Anna works at least 10 hours a week, often more like 15, 20, just me and her. And I feel like, I don't know, it's very validating for me to be like, you know what, creative jobs also, like, you think of them as sucking all your time away and like all your attention, because they're not so structured in some ways. But at least in my case, I found that I've had more time in some ways, like, because I can work later at night, I can spend time with her while she's awake. And it's great to feel comfortable as the dad. We just have a lot of friends our age where the dads are still kind of weird with their kid. But because I've been, since she's 3 months old, I just had to figure it out because Anna's at work and I'm like, sleep.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been great. Just this past few years. And I think, I don't know. That's what I was going to say. So when you said things that get you up out of bed in the morning, we've been talking about career, but just Anna and Swede is the name of our kid. Swede isn't like a person from Sweden. It's from a book that we read that we both liked. Everybody's like, oh, sweet. That's weird. I'm like, no, it's weirder, but it's also not that. I don't know. It's been a really cool time, especially during this quarantine, because I haven't lost my job, and I know literally millions and millions of people have, and it's really hard for a lot of people. But just to have more time to do creative stuff and more time with my family has been it's been great.
Yeah.
Legitimately very awesome.
So have you, since your wife is not into the movies thing as much, have you been sharing your geek passions with your daughter?
Well, I mean, no, because, as much as I love all this stuff, you know, kind of my whole thing, like, I don't necessarily want you just ingesting things because it's cool that they explode or that like it looks pretty or like it distracts for a while. So she hasn't watched anything at all, and I don't necessarily intend to let her until I can kind of talk to her a little bit. And I know that's like, well, you can watch Paw Patrol or whatever and it doesn't matter, but I don't know. My weird thing is I've always never thought of entertainment as pure fun, or if it is, it's in a communal way. Like, it's me and my college roommate are bonding over watching 7 Saw movies in a row one night or whatever.
Right.
It's not just like I'm exhausted, I'm going to turn on a movie to like zone out. Sometimes it's that, sure, but I don't know. I think they affect us, and so I want to think about them. And also, it's sort of a job for me, and I've found ways to make money writing about it and thinking about it. So I mostly don't like to just kick back and let it wash over me. I want to think about it if I can. Mm-hmm. So I hope that I can. My wife was literally just saying, you know, my dad, I didn't want to hang out with my dad one-on-one on car rides because I was worried he would ask me like deep questions about like spirituality or like my dating life or something. And I'm worried that our daughter's going to not want to hang out with you one-on-one because you'll want to talk about the Matrix or something. Which, you know, it's probably fair, but
that's also essentially deep questions about spirituality.
Right. Yeah. So. Right. I don't know. I just want to be intentional.
Yeah. Well, like you said about Tarantino, it's about the context. Like there's more to it than just explosions and like flashing lights and stuff like that. Is there's a story being told, whether it's intentional or not, and I think all of those things shape us. Like you said, they affect us, and I think that they affect us a lot in ways that we do know, but they also affect us in ways that we can't imagine. So
yeah, and I think even if nothing else, a big thing that I enjoy about cultural stuff, just entertainment in general, and even the YouTube videos, I mean, you see this a little bit. I really like talking to other people about it. And I like the social lubricant of it, in the sense of just by virtue of being interested in lots of things. I actually really like small talk now. It's very unlikely that if I'm talking to somebody at a random party or whatever that I've been forced to, that I can't find something interesting. Just as an example, we were at a wedding recently, and somebody's husband, I was like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm a shipping coordinator or something for Target." And I was like, "That's interesting, because I just wrote an article about how Target buys a lot of gray market Tide detergent stuff because people will steal Tide and then sell it back to Target, and Target will buy it because they don't care. Like, they would rather get it for cheap prices." Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we do that." And then his wife is like, "What?" And so I don't know. I just love that, because otherwise I'd sit there and be like, "Oh, is that interesting? The shipping and receiving of Target products?" Not to say that you can't have an interesting job, but I just mean, like, I don't know. I've enjoyed that, having things to talk to people about, I guess.
Yeah, you have like an in the conversation already, like just by nature of the things that you consume that you can use.
Yeah, hopefully. And then, you know, it can build to something from there, or it cannot. And the evening is not as terrible as it otherwise might have been. And so, I don't know. I guess I just think there are a lot of cool things that video games and movies and stuff can do to bring people together, and not just for me by myself to go kill some brain cells to like recuperate or whatever. Although it can do that. That's not primarily interesting to me.
Yeah.
You mentioned you work for a church. Do you blend the two ever, or do you just keep them separate?
I mean, I do videos for them, and obviously I do a lot of creative work with like music and stuff. As far as like, do I bring up my thoughts on the Matrix before this next song?
Right.
Not as much.
Mhm.
I mean, the main way that it works is just both of them and together. I mean, literally in this exact instance, it brings up a lot of really cool and interesting conversations. People being like, "That's super weird that you work at a church and write about movies for this comedy site.
Mhm.
That can be off color."
Yeah.
And vice versa, and getting to share sort of how I think those things are not incompatible.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, I don't know. I think they fit together really well in a lot of ways, but not as well as like, yeah, like either here's my worship song before we start talking about the Matrix, or vice versa. Here's the Matrix, also sing along.
Yeah.
Maybe someday. I don't know.
I've definitely, in youth ministry, I have definitely forced that connection
Sure.
before. And it like, when you're doing it like during like high school youth group, it can go okay. But I could see during a service for the whole congregation, maybe they don't need to hear your thoughts on how the apostles are kind of like the Green Lantern Corps.
Right.
Like,
I mean, if you're a pastor, maybe, like if you're giving more of a sermon, I mostly try and let most of the music kind
do
of
the
talk for
talking.
itself. There have been a few instances where I've used that to like defend word choice that I don't think is heretical in the way that some might in a song. But that's, I mean, I think, yeah, just in a very basic way, like critical thinking, deep dive skills can translate to most mediums, I suppose. I mean, I think the way more practically plays out is the ability to communicate with people works when like hanging out with team members, or recruiting new musicians, or yeah, just talking to people about life helps you get through the like, all right, well now we're here with our cheeseburgers or whatever. How do I get this ball rolling?
Yeah.
And work our way into things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
No, it does.
that's probably the most direct correlation. And then, yeah, just, I mean, so, you know, one cool thing was Daniel O'Brien messaged me the other day because he saw the FAQ video and he's like, "That's so cool that you are a worship leader because my brother is one." And I just think that's cool to, I don't know, get to talk about or connect over in a way that you might not be able to otherwise.
Yeah, because we earlier this season we had a pastor on here, and he makes a ton of geeky references in his homilies, and actually caught a good amount of hell with traditional Catholics because he did this whole thing with Baby Yoda during Christmas Eve.
That's funny.
And yeah, and he went there, and then he went viral, and he had to deal with the onslaught of dealing with the crazy Catholics.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I have a tendency, I mean, I don't want to overplay this, but I do think the whole like culture war thing and American Christianity as being really upset about a lot of stuff is really not super valuable, I don't think, in a lot of ways. I feel like we spend a lot of time focusing on, I think, things that ultimately don't really matter that much. I mean, other than that, I think we should all be thinking about the things that we're consuming. Like, I totally get that. Obviously, I espouse that, but I don't think we give people enough credit. And I think, I don't want to get too into it, but basically, I just think that American Christianity has a bad reputation for really focusing really hard on things that are very much secondary or even tertiary to what I would think would be relevant. But
no, I agree. I think I would also say it's an earned bad reputation at times.
right.
I think, like you said, there is a connection between like our faith and the content we consume, in that like they aren't just something like church isn't something we just do on Sunday. It is supposed to influence our whole lives, and the content that we consume isn't just influencing us in that moment. It is influencing the way that we talk about other people, the way that we view others, the way that we view the world. And so I think it's if the content we consume, if it has as much of a ability to influence us negatively as a lot of Christians would claim, I think it's silly to think that it doesn't also have the ability to positively influence us just as much, if not more.
Sure. And also, I guess part of what I'm suggesting is that even watching a Saw movie with other people can be a way to foster community. And even though it's probably not as positive as some other way, I do think there is just value in building that kind of shared community. One of the classes I actually took, one of the seminary classes, was about culture and how do Christians intersect. And one of the things that they showed us a documentary called Wrestling for Jesus. I don't know if you've heard of this. And it's literally about backwoods, I want to say Alabama, but it's, some other state. And they would host literal WWE style wrestling matches. And I'm not talking about, they're not just, it's like scripted stuff. It's not just like they had heels and stuff. And in the middle, they would share testimony, and then they'd go back to beating the crap out of each other. And it's wild because it's all independent, and these people are really hurting themselves and all this stuff, but they really believe in it. It's crazy too, because over the course of the documentary, like the main guy and his wife get divorced, and it, a lot of stuff falls apart, and it's pretty ugly because it's low income, like people that don't have a lot of hope anyway, and just their lives are tough, and it kind of falls apart. And then at the end of it, the teacher was like, "So what do you think?" And a couple of the girls were like, "That's gross. Like, you can't have Jesus like compared like with violence." And it kind of got to like, this is actually really awesome because this is contextualizing in a way that you would never expect. Like, that's not something I would ever think of because I don't care that much about wrestling. I know you do, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
So, but like, it's so cool to be able to, if nothing else, make, again, connections with people in this context. Are either of you familiar with the author N.T. Wright?
No,
the name sounds familiar, but
he is an Anglican, I believe, but he has written a million books. But one of the books that he's written that I really like is called Surprised by Hope, and one of the big thrust of the message is that the way that we as Christians, and particularly American Christians, have been viewing heaven and what that means is pretty much wrong, in that really the ultimate hope of the Christian is not, well, the earth will blow up and then we'll go up to heaven and it'll be fine and we'll float around separate from our body, but rather that we don't really know what heaven is like exactly, but the ultimate thing is heaven coming down to earth and the earth being remade. It's akin to sanctification. And basically the idea being that whatever our eternal thing is, it'll be bodily, like in these bodies, in the sense that Jesus still had the scars in his hands when he was not reincarnated, when he was brought back. And earth will be made of the same stuff. And so the culture that we make now can theoretically survive that in some sense, we can add to some of what's being remade. One of the metaphors he gave was, we're built, if the new earth could be essentially a cathedral and everybody's bringing their one brick or whatever, and in and of itself, it's not much. And they're not making the cathedral. The cathedral has to be made by an architect who has the idea and transforms it from a pile of bricks to a cathedral. But there's still some part that we can play. And that's so much more encouraging to me personally than the I just got to do the best that I can. And if I get COVID, it's fine because the earth will blow up at some point and I'll get out of here. Rather than being like, what I'm doing now matters in some real tangible way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that on some level informs a lot more of what I do, because it's not so much that I'm scared of the end goal isn't do I do good enough to get to heaven or do I do bad enough to miss out, and more about what can I do to work in relationships and in culture now,
mm-hmm.
in the hopes that even when I fail, I'm doing something positive, at least working in a direction, as opposed to just kind of letting everything happen because nothing matters. I just got to not murder somebody and then I'll be okay.
So what you're saying is that heaven will have backyard indie wrestling in it?
The new earth will have backyard.
The new earth, sorry, yes. There we go.
But
perfect.
Legitimately, maybe. It would be dumb for me to claim that I know anything about anything, but I do think it seems to line up a lot more with what early Christians believed. And then we kind of later on started to get into this idea of heaven is this ethereal thing, and it's sort of nebulous, and we're souls, we're not bodies. And he goes into a lot of detail with this, but it's even stuff if we claim that we're conquering death, we're not conquering death if the body is still dead. And we're just a soul. We're recharacterizing death, but the body is still, when Lazarus was brought back, he was alive. He wasn't see, look, I brought him back. And he's just floating over to you and his body's still dead. Anyway, that stuff is everything, reading a lot into it and not just kind of being I'll just, whatever you tell me about the Bible is fine. And trying to read into it a little bit more. And so that is another thing that gets me out of bed, thinking that my life has purpose beyond, can I muddle through for 80 years until I get out of this hellhole and into the real deal.
Yeah.
So that's why I like The Good Place, because it really did drive home that there was something to keep going for once you were dead. That there was
it's
something
so
worth
nihilist,
achieving.
though.
Yeah, it is.
It's heaven's not even good enough.
Yeah.
I
agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying the thing that sucks about it is even if we could do anything that we wanted, we would never be satisfied because we need to die, because there's no way to be fulfilled in our lives, which is sort of depressing.
Yeah.
But I agree. It's cool that it was there's still ways to improve and stuff.
Yeah. The thing I do appreciate about The Good Place, though, is I feel so many, especially in Hollywood, there can be a very negative view of faith or Christianity, in that, it's all stupid, throw it all out. And sure. I think that the thing that The Good Place did really well is obviously that view of heaven doesn't line up with what most Christians or most people of faith would believe it to be, but sure. It was a case where somebody was looking at the afterlife or what happens after, and saying, okay, well, Michael Schur, it didn't sound, from interviews, it doesn't sound like he thinks it's Christian heaven at all. But he also doesn't seem to think, well, maybe there's nothing. let's dive in a little bit. And I appreciated him at least trying to wrestle with it a little bit.
I do feel like in my opinion, it feels ultimately more about what is morality than what is the afterlife.
Yeah.
Because even at the end, what they really build is a new moral. Well, I guess not really. I guess it is an afterlife. I guess it just feels like it's the whole show is just a way to discuss ethics and morality.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What we do for one another.
Its ultimate conclusion is that you can't be faulted, essentially. Like, anybody could always improve, which is not a bad takeaway, I suppose.
Yeah. It's also a very funny show. It's just a really well
made Upload, right? Am I mistaken on that?
I believe he did.
I didn't like Upload as much. It was neither as funny nor as fleshed out. But it was okay. That's Greg Daniels. That's Greg Daniels. Never mind.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Because Sure did The Office, Parks and Rec.
No. Well, Sure wrote on The Office, but Greg Daniels created it, right?
And that's why it's confusing, because they overlap somewhere.
Because Sure was Cousin Moe's in The Office.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, because he was a writer on The Office. Then he went to make Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
He co-created Parks and Rec with Greg Daniels. Then he created Good Place. Mm-hmm. Then he co-created Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Mm-hmm. So yes, they're like they run in the same circles, clearly.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
I'm glad we figured that out together, guys. That was we really got down to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
What gets Michael Schur out of bed?
Oh, that's our next episode.
Get him on here.
I don't know if just randomly DMing him or tweeting at him like I did with you is gonna work.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, I'm just a guy. I don't it's not like I'm co-creating Parks and Rec or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's just fun to get on podcasts and to talk to people. I don't get to do very much, so I might as well ride this wave while I've got it, while people would be interested in listening to what I have to say.
Well, I have grown up in these worlds where there's like celebrities in small pockets that are like very important and maybe a little bit on a pedestal to me that nobody else has ever heard of. Like that way with wrestlers. It's been that way with like Catholic musicians and speakers.
Okay.
Like if I met Matt Maher, and like anybody else would be like,
my friend's wife was on tour with him pre-COVID.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she was his like acoustic guitarist / female vocalist. Anyway,
but like as like outside of the Christian world, nobody's gonna know who Matt Maher is for the most part. And I feel like it's that way with YouTube as well. Like talking to you and talking to the guest that we had last week is like a wrestler and YouTuber that I'm really into, that like most people probably haven't heard of, but you guys all have something interesting to talk about and something to share. And I think the whole idea behind this podcast is that everybody has that thing that when you get them talking about it, they just light up and they're excited because you have hit on something that is a big passion of theirs.
Yeah, I get that. And I mean, it's just, again, I think that's why I try and be relatively active in the YouTube comment section and stuff. Like, I don't know that it's necessarily, I don't necessarily engage with people that are butts just because
Yeah.
It's not like you're going to change anybody's mind, but I do think that there is the potential to foster like interesting conversations there, or even just to be thankful. I mean, they're watching it, so I don't know. I don't. I could see that changing someday if it gets out of hand, but I feel like if at all possible, I still want to be a part of a conversation. I don't want to just be making, I mean, I'm already literally just making crap in my basement with one guy. So it's super easy to feel so removed and that none of this is real anyway. It's just kind of like we go down there for a few hours and then I never see or talk to anybody about it. It just kind of is. So it's really fun to, talk about some of this stuff every once in a while.
You take a chance on yourself, and I think that happens more with like the millennial generation than my generation. I'm Gen X, and I feel like we all just sort of went to work and quietly like we're like, all right, we're going to do the job. We're just going to fit in.
Sure.
But like I feel like your generation and even those that are younger, they take a chance on themselves that's kind of inspiring to me as somebody who's just slightly older. You know, I'm in my early 40s and I'm like, look at that. I admire it. I admire the betting on yourself of it all.
It's more about me never wanting a real job, but
that's like the biggest goal.
Living the dream.
I mean, don't say this to anybody who pays me, but I do not care about money at all. I just want enough to not have to get a real job. But also, if anybody asks, I need like $1 million a year or whatever.
Yeah, I think my goal when I left youth ministry, my goal financially was to make enough money and to have a schedule to where I had time to do the activities that I wanted to do, like do the creative.
And that's the other way to go. That's a smart way to go. That's an easier way. I mean, like a more sustainable way to go.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't like enjoy my work as much as you might. But I think
but also nobody's emailing you telling you to cut your balls off and die. So
that's, well, I mean, some of my work emails can get a little bit rough.
Well,
people get real mad in IT if you don't fix their computer properly. Yeah. So,
no. Yeah. So a DM to come hang out on a podcast is much more preferable to, go kill yourself.
Yeah.
Ruining my life. And
that was going to be my response if you had said no. So.
Right. Well, thank goodness I said yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank God you did.
Just add it to the pile.
But thank you so much, Jordan. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thanks again for getting however many drinks deep and sending an invitation.
Actually, you should be honored because this is probably the first time in a while I haven't even gotten one fully. Now I have.
Am honored?
Well, normally I am like, I might get distracted and I'll just like, okay, I'm going to, while you're talking, just pour myself another one.
Okay.
But I was so engrossed in the conversation that I could only have the one.
Yeah.
Well, if it's any consolation, dude, you sound super buzzed.
Also, I look buzzed because my video is like doing this weird like blur delay thing, and I think it might be my wife is a videographer and she has these very fancy studio light thingies, and I think maybe changing the lighting made that happen. I don't really know.
It's like that scene in Look Who's Talking when the epidural gets given to Kirstie Alley. And the baby's like seeing the wavy lines and all that stuff.
Yeah. Man. Well, Jordan, before we go, is there anywhere that people can find you that you would like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, if you've gotten this far and you still aren't aware of the YouTube channel, Cracked, we're doing shows on it. It's pretty friggin' fun. It's crazy. It's literally just two of us plus another guy helping with editing. It is so much stinking work, but it is a blast. So YouTube/cracked or whatever. I don't know. Just type in cracked.
And we'll link it in the description.
Yeah, and there's so many other videos. I mean, that's like the whole point is there's like this. I mean, I think they have almost 1,800 videos. There's like so much good stuff on there. So check that out too. My Twitter, I think, is at _J_breeding or something. Yeah, _J_breeding. So maybe follow me there, and then if you matter, just hire me for something. I'm always looking for things to do.
Perfect.
If not, then just follow me on Twitter and watch YouTube, I guess.
Nice. Other than Your Brain on Cracked, is there one like maybe older like series or show on the Crack channel that people need to check out first?
Well, there are several. The one that actually got me into it was Does Not Compute, the Michael Swaim one. But obviously Obsessive Pop Culture Disorder and After Hours are like the two flagship programs. Maybe watch After Hours because that's less similar to mine, so you won't think I'm just ripping everyone off.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. Matt, do you have anything to share before we leave?
No, just really love the conversation. I really do appreciate you being here, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks again for having me.
Awesome. You can follow us on outofbed_podcast on Instagram, and go check out some of our older episodes. We have, as of recording this, coming out tomorrow, RJ City's episode, and then we recorded a couple weeks ago our friend Devin McKay, and go check those out. Those are really great. Thank you so much. I have been Topher. Matt,
and this is Matt.
And we got out of bed, so there's still quarantine stuff going on, so go get back in bed. Thank you so much. Bye.